Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies, the Friends Edition. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Of course, we've got a great show for you tonight. We will be taking a look at, and it's actually part of a two-parter, we're going to be taking a look at BRIGHTBURN, and actually we've got a special guest co-host, somebody you've seen before on the channel. We're going to be taking a look at this because, of course, my regular co-host, Jim, is on holidays. So we're going to be taking a look at this. But like I said, it's part of a two-parter, actually. And the other part is Superman. We've already recorded this. It was supposed to go up last week, but the vicissitudes of life, stuff happens. This sort of thing happens all the time. So anyway, that's what we're doing. Let's get back to the movie at hand, and where the heck are my notes? Once again, Rob can't find his notes. Oh, here we are. Okay, let's get this stuff in front of me. Yes, BRIGHTBURN. Interestingly enough, its working title was Untitled James Gunn Horror Project. Here's the log line from IMDb. What if a child from another world crash landed on Earth? I know you've never heard that concept before, but instead of becoming a hero to mankind, he proved to be something far more sinister. Anyway, this was directed by David Yarovesky, not by Mr. Gunn, but it was written by, I think his cousins or his brothers. Anyway, written by Brian Gunn, Mark Gunn. And James Gunn was one of the producers. It stars Elizabeth Banks, David Denman, and in the role of the child who falls to Earth, Jackson A. Dunn. It also stars Matt Jones, Meredith Hagner, Emmie Hunter, and Michael Rooker, which is kind of interesting. Let's go over to the social nutrition checklist. And does it get a reframe stamp? Good Lord, it does not. Union made? Yes. Bechdel test pass? No. And can you call it class conscious? I don't think you can. So I'm giving this a 25%. But back to here, folks, and we usually, this is the point where we take a look at historicity, but what a terrible idea. What historicity? It's a superpowers movie. So we're not going to be doing historicity. What we are going to be doing, and you can hear him chuckling already, is we're going to jump right into it. We're going to introduce my co-host with the most, my guest co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend, Dragon Movie Guy, otherwise known as Brian. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You know what? The pleasure is very much mine. Thank you very much for being willing to pinch hit for Jim. We've done this before, though, so it's not like you're new. In other words, you can't blame me. You knew what you were getting into.
It's the perfect way to end a Labor Day weekend.
Let's quickly. We got no one in the chat right now, which makes me a little sad. That said, that doesn't mean that we aren't. Well, no, as a matter of fact, it looks like we do have a couple of folks in the chat. It would be you, Brian. That's who would be
populated the field.
I may have actually, you know what? I'm going to make a couple of adjustments here because it looks like what I did was perhaps, whoops. Should have. This is all my fault, folks. There we go. I was cutting off the chatters. It's terrible. Of course, again, it's only It's only Brian, so anyway, why don't let's jump into it. Let's jump into this flick right away. Let's before though we get into the spoiler zone, the story and the meaning. Brian, whoops. Let's talk about the craft. What do you want to say? What do you want to talk about as far as the performance, the look, the feel of the movie? Before we get into the meat of it.
I liked the look and feel of it. It was pretty solid across the board. Solid cinematography, effects. All of it was pretty well done for being a relatively low budget horror film.
Yeah. Yeah, at times you're absolutely right. I loved the way they kind of played with did what they could with the let's say the kids' movements and that. There was though, and I was dying to ask you about this. There is early in the film, something gets thrown. We're not quite into the spoiler zone yet. Something gets thrown, and I was just like, oh, I wonder if Brian will have an opinion on that.
Well, yeah. There was a couple of like that one, and then right at the very very end, one of the effects at the end kind of was a little didn't quite pass the uncanny valley test, but overall I thought the effects were pretty well done, and it's a good test. It's a testament to good filmmaking that we can overlook the kind of CGI effects. So
no, and I agree with you completely. It was just, again, when I saw it, I'm like, oh yeah, that'll be a bit of an eye maybe not, obviously not an eye poker, but definitely one of these for you. A little bit.
I was watching it on my home TV anyway, so it's not like it was on the big screen for me to watch. So I was sort of just kind of comparing it to like the CW, the CW DC shows, because it's a Superman ripoff anyway. Yeah. So I just kind of put it in that category of special effects. So.
I gotcha. Picking up what you're putting down there, sir.
Yes.
Okay. For myself, they really did do a great job with setting the tone. There was no time I wasn't frightened when I wasn't supposed to be frightened, or vice versa. Do you know what I mean? Like, the mood is always set properly. When you're, okay, this is a breathing moment. Okay, something terrible is about to happen. Or, and only a couple of jump scares, like a really obvious sort of, well, thanks, jerks. So I liked that. Was there anything, like, if you were to say, okay, that was the standout performance, what would it be for you?
I actually thought it, in a fairly difficult role to do, considering everyone's going to compare it to Superman, I thought the kid, the 12-year-old,
really
playing Brandon, did a relatively good job, trying to play an evil Superman, or Jackson A. Dunn. Yeah, I thought he did a pretty good job, because trying to play that awkward age, as well as a sort of a character with that kind of mythical powers, that's not an easy thing to do. So I thought he did a good job, and then Elizabeth Banks too. Obviously, she was great.
For myself, we're gonna come back to Mr. Dunn, Jackson, but I think Elizabeth Banks did a great job. I bought her. Mind you, I don't think there was anyone where I was going, I don't think I had any eye roll moments as far as performance goes either. Like, I mean, they all knew what they were in and delivered that. It was my feeling.
Yeah, I liked the other one that in a fairly small role, I thought that did a good job, was the object of Brandon's lust, for lack of Emmie Hunter as Caitlin.
Yes.
I thought that she did a pretty good job of not not just being the creeped out teenage girl who hates a guy for no reason. Like she was sensing whatever she was sensing. We don't really see what she was sensing beforehand leading up to all that, but I thought she did a pretty good job in that role, which could have easily fallen into the scared teenage girl trope. So
again, they knew what they were in. They did it. I am going to come back though to Jackson and that character when we get into the spoiler zone. But before we go there, I would like to say hello. Let's say hello to somebody in the chat, actually. Looks like we've got Katie Fowler. Hello, Katie. It looks like she is here. So I suspect that Richard L. is somewhere, lurking, which is A-okay with us. But great to see you, Katie. And if Richard L. isn't around, please pass on our compliments anyway. Okay, let's get back to this. You know what? Let's jump into the Let's jump into the spoiler zone. Oh my goodness, Jelly Duck just jumped in, but yeah. Jelly Duck. But yes, we're now in the spoiler zone. Duncraft story. I wanted to ask you, what would you change about the story, the way this thing was told, if you're going to change anything? Like, give me a key or just a couple of notes. Basically, Brian, I don't want to hear you go, well, let's start with the setting. Let's put it in Ventura, California. And it should be a family of cockroaches. And
I like that it was in Kansas. If we're ripping off Superman, might as well make it in Kansas as well. Yeah. It was in Brightburn, Kansas, as opposed to Smallville. But other than that, I liked the parallels. I liked most of the setup of this film. The only thing I would say is I think it kind of ends at a weird place, story wise. But
really?
It does in a logical place.
Well, yeah.
Well,
because why weird? Yeah, because I agree with you. This is how you end. I thought if there's a way you could end this movie, this is the way you end it. We're in the spoiler zone, of course. Of course, he kills his mother. Well,
maybe it's just because this is a parallel to Superman. And we see Superman growing up. We see we've seen all parts of the Superman story before. So the fact that we're sort of ending it almost like a Coen Brothers movie, where the ending of this film could easily be the 2/3 mark of a Coen Brothers film, like the one where they end with the tornado with Matt Damon staring at it. That's sort of what I was feeling with this film, where. And we see it when the credits roll. We see the him emerging, revealing himself to the world in the post credit scenes.
Yeah.
So I think it easily could have been, well, what happens to him? Not just whoa, here's this whoever he is with powers like Superman. Where does it go from there? I think it could have made sense.
You know what, myself, I'm not sure they'd have the time. It would have a weird end then. Like you'd have to kill her in the second act. I guess you could, yeah. Maybe that would have made it more interesting myself. My biggest beef with this story actually was not so much it's a tight little horror movie, because it is a horror movie. It's Superman if it was a horror. And for myself, Brian, I honestly was just, could they have made the boy more sympathetic at the beginning, a little bit more of an arc for him, a little bit more of him struggling with who he's becoming even? It's almost like, in a way, the character's just early on, it's like he's possessed and then he's just bad. There's no break bad. There's no moment of struggle and trying to, I'm just figuring out who I am. Like, it reminds me in so many respects of, I don't know if you saw the film Ginger Snaps.
No.
Canadian film, werewolf film, but it's about, it's how the woman becomes, a young woman becomes a werewolf as of course her name's Ginger, as her first period comes on. And so you get that everything about a young woman going through that change. There's other things, there's a sister, there's all kinds of drama. So you feel for her throughout. But having said that, is this movie actually about him or is it about the mother? What do you think? Like, is this movie about Elizabeth Banks? I mean, her character.
Yeah, I think it's about the parents as a couple more than just Elizabeth Banks as the mother. But yeah, I think it's that's who we see that's who we see the film through, is through Elizabeth Banks and David Denman's character. It's which is kind of weird for this story because it's a Superman retelling. So usually we see it through Kal-El / Clark Kent's eyes. So to see,
maybe that's what I've been stuck on. Is I'm like, keep going. Sorry, shouldn't interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's also I like the setup for this story because we jump into the story pretty quickly, and the fact that the vast majority of this film takes place when he's 12 years old, which is that awkward age. And usually in the Superman story, this is the age where we kind of jump through it, or even in Smallville, the TV show, you're granted we're doing a year per year kind of thing, but to spend
they wanted to get to the girls quickly.
Yeah. Well, it's to spend that much time right in that awkward stage, and it was very logical the way they exposed it, or to the way that they laid out the story. I like that we don't see as much of Brandon's character beforehand, so we're kind of feeling it as he's feeling it. And honestly, too, I think it was more the spaceship controlling him as opposed to him Breaking Bad.
That's exactly it. So it's all of a sudden, it's like, if we had, it's a little kid, or like we don't spend any time with them. Like, does he have at least a friend, something, some moment? And then here is this thing that's possessing him, and he struggles with it. That at the end, it's, boy, this is kind of like, I think it would have had more, the end would have had more emotional weight if you see this kid who loves his mother end up killing her because he's been overwhelmed by the voices or something, like, well, but in a weird way, like, we're told that he has a relationship with his mother, but it's like we see so little of that it's like, I don't feel the emotional stakes the way I think I could have.
Well, but we're also seeing the betrayal from his point of view too, where his adoptive father shoots him in the back of the head, and his mother tries to stab him in the back, literally. So, I mean,
but we don't care about him enough to really go, oh, that must have felt shitty. It was more like, well, by then we're all like, okay, this little bastard needs to go.
Yeah, there is a definite Damien quality there for sure. But there is that when they do the whistle thing, or whatever the notes were, it's some part of him is getting through. Some part of his raised by humans portion is coming through there. But if he's bent over in front of his dad, examining whatever he was examining, and he feels, the bullet hitting him in the back of the head, that's a pretty big betrayal for an adoptive father. And then for his mother to make that, like, I'm never going
But
to
is it
abandon
a
my son, come what
betrayal?
may.
But is it a betrayal? Like,
Yeah,
by then,
from
the
his
little
point of view, it's a
shit is,
betrayal.
did you actually seem to think that by then he gave two shits about his parents, about his adoptive parents?
I think part of him did, yes.
You know, because I don't
Not
think we saw that emotion in him. More the
well, it's not a crying sort of thing. Like we don't really see him in touch with his emotions, like when they're like, your uncle's dead.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, so
uncles
I
be dying all the time.
yeah.
Should I cry
Yeah,
for them all? But I think
he's
that's exactly it. He's goes from little boy to sociopath like that, and you're like, I am not invested in him enough. That was like, I guess for me, that's what sort of stopped me in this movie. It's like, really just not, I'm not feeling it. But again, back to my original question: is this about the kid at all, or is it really about Elizabeth Banks? Like her
I think
character?
it's about both. I think it's about them both. I mean, because that age, that 12-year-old age, as as a kid is maturing. That's a really awkward time, and they tried having one of those scenes with David Denman's character, try to be the dad character, talking about really awkward subject matter.
To which he
but
goes, "Oh, so I could go just like a vampire in another movie, creep on the girl who was nice to me."
yeah, but also they're not really establishing if the parents know he has powers at that point.
Oh,
As
I don't
well.
think
I mean, they know he's from outer space,
different.
but
They don't know he has powers. They just, oh, we should talk to him. That's not right. Like any parents finding like if their kid's got a creepy thing between the mattresses.
yeah.
You
Well,
know, like-
and how creepy is creepy? Like, is it normal, weird developmental kind of things popping up?
I'm
or
not
is it like,
defending the thing. I'm saying
Yeah.
that there's nothing up to that point that tips the parents off. At least we as the audience know.
yeah,
That says he's superpower special. It's more just, is this normal for a kid to be looking at? I don't know. Maybe we should talk to him. Like, you could see that, and I think we have seen it in films. We have to talk about Kevin, or there's other movies where it's like the kid ain't right without superpowers, and the parents are discovering things that show he's not right in the head or whatever. I mean, kind of a little offensive description of that, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think like it's such a cool premise, and they've done so much so well. I just think the story just doesn't quite land, and I'm like myself. I'm just trying to figure out why. Like, I'll kind of forget about this movie. I'm already starting to forget about this movie.
Well, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie or like what.
I don't think
would be
you
on
were.
anyone's top 10. No, but I think for what this
How
film
could
is
it
and
be
what
a better movie? That's what I'm asking.
Sure, but I like what they did and what they were trying to do, and I think what they were trying to do, they accomplished in what
Okay.
in terms of its execution.
All right,
I believe so.
Okay, well, before we're going to get into that, definitely, because I think that's almost a cue for getting into the meaning. Back to the movie we're actually talking about. What does this movie mean? What are we supposed to be frightened of? Horror films are usually kind of, try to get at something in the zeitgeist, some fear of ours. What do you think this thing is? Where do you think this movie wants us to go, fear-wise?
Beware of hormonal teenage boys who have superpowers. Look,
You argue beware of any a teenage boy. any girl, any little girl out there is being coached,
Well, no, look, I think it's one of those things where if you look at anyone at an age of change, you're gonna have a lot of awkward, socially awkward things that don't reflect the person as they were before and as they will be 5 years from now.
So you think this is a commentary on puberty?
I think it's just it's a take on what if Superman were evil.
No,
And I think
that's not
that's a good character.
That's not a
that's
theme.
the premise.
That's not a theme, though. Yeah, we talked about story before.
Yeah.
What is
no? But that's what I think.
But that's not a theme. That's
okay.
not
What's
meaning.
your definition of this then?
Well, a theme is, hey, we're making a commentary on.
Mm-hmm. They're making a commentary on Superman.
So on
hitting puberty.
All right. Okay. Anything else you think it's saying?
I think it's actually saying too that a lot of the liking of dark movies inherent is well, see, now I've gotten so distracted by our side conversation I've forgotten all about the movies. So maybe my opinions are just like everyone else's in this case. But
well, let me ask you this. Do you think, like, one of the key moments early in the film, and it's a bit of a story moment, but it could also be a bit of a theme, a revealing of theme, was Elizabeth Banks' character, I guess her parents were hard asses who wrote her off. Mm-hmm. So she, not only does she want to have a kid, but she wants to make sure that, hey, I am the last person writing that kid off, which I rang true to me because well, you must remember that era of tough love, a big 80s parenting fad. Anyway, is there something in there thematically? Like, are they making a statement about motherhood?
I think if anything, they're making a statement about adoption and motherhood, adoptive parents, and the fact that when you have an adoption, this isn't a child that happens to a couple. This isn't a pregnancy that was a whoops prom night kind of a thing. This is
or even a planned pregnancy.
And well, no, but that's the whole point, though, is that this is not a pregnancy that just sort of happened. This is a couple that was having a hard time desperately wanting a child, having a hard time having one naturally,
and then whoops, one literally fell from the sky.
Yes. and because they didn't just get knocked up, because they had to work for it, because they had to choose this child to be their child, there is a different depth to the emotionality of the character and the dedication to wanting to believe that your child that you raised, the nature versus nurture argument, is good.
Now there's a theme. Yeah, is it saying it? If that's what they were thinking at all, or maybe they're just poking at that idea of nature versus nurture. Yeah, that maybe the parents have little to do with how the kid is gonna turn out. Although, mind you, because this is that valid, because it's not like the kid, well, maybe that's exactly it. It's like, no, it's nature, not nurture.
Well, I think it's an overly simplistic argument to make either way.
I'm just saying
sometimes
one of the
it
things.
is, sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not talking about whether that's right or wrong. I'm talking about this movie, and maybe that's one of the things they're getting at. That there's part of what they're doing is playing with this idea. It makes us uncomfortable because I think human beings like to believe both, depending on the scenario. It's like, oh, well, I'm a Christensen I was born of, versus, oh, I behaved that way because my parents were terrible.
Well, and even what part of that person, what part of that personality or what part of their upbringing is, because sometimes it might be nature, sometimes it might be nurture. It could be a little bit of both, depending on what part we're talking about.
Well, that is. Go ahead. No, finish.
No, and that's just it. And that is a rich area to explore.
Yeah.
And I think that's without getting caught up in the semantics of it, I think that's one of the things that I liked about this film, exploring it, but yet still having a fun horror film with cool kill scenes.
And this is why I'm, and I guess we're moving into our, let's say, the director pass or fail. For myself, I mean, it was a fine movie, and in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not when I say a fan, I don't have the horror palette. It's a kind of movie I would have loved as a kid, but I don't have that palette anymore. I was very uncomfortable at times, so I'm like, if somebody had just asked me, is it scary? I'm like, fuck yeah, it is. I was scared. Although a regular horror fan might go, pussy. That said, I do think it's a weaker film because they could have explored that more. Again, back to, if we saw some struggle in them, that struggle between nature versus nurture, we do kind of see a little bit of a struggle with the parents, as it takes them a while to even kind of go, oh, little Billy's got to be dealt with. I'm sorry, little Braden. But you know what I mean? Like, even they don't want to believe that this kid that they nurtured is a space alien out for blood. And I don't think they did that as effectively as they could have. Would I call it a fail, though? No. Like, I mean, solid 90 minutes of scary, and they touched on some interesting ideas. I think there's even a bit of again, back to that parents, and maybe this seems to be more of a pop culture idea, that poking at that idea that, of course, the woman will be the mother will be the last to give up. Could have done a better job, but still, they did a pretty good job. It was, again, like, as you said, with the money they had, solid 90 minutes, not bad. I'd give this guy a C, maybe even a C+. What would you give him?
For this film, I would give it a B, a solid B. I think for what they were trying to do with the budget they had to work with. A B for a B movie? Yeah. I am like you. I am not a horror film and fan aficionado in any way, shape, or form. It is not a medium that I particularly enjoy.
It's a tough genre.
Well, it's there's a certain enjoying of Schadenfreude I think a little bit that goes along with horror films that I'm not particularly a fan of, never have been, not even when I was a teenager. That being said, if you judge a film on its own merits and what a film is trying to say, or what I believe the film is trying to do, I think that they accomplished a lot of what they were trying to do with this film in terms of just telling a Superman story, but what if? Mm-hmm. And still doing a horror film, still having some creative horror film kills, and watching Badger from Breaking Bad lose his jaw. That's a cool death shot. That is a cool death shot. Yeah. So seeing Roy from The Office, getting killed and his face melted in, that was kind of a fun shot. So, it is not.
Bottom line. Okay, I'm cutting you off there. A B.
Yeah, a B.
Okay. Yeah. All right. before we get into final thoughts, I do have to talk about next week's movie. Of course, I think I mentioned this before. I will be releasing either later tonight or tomorrow. I just about finished the edit. I've been really quite slack. Is our Superman, what I like to refer to as the original. But if you watch it, Brian was kind enough to give us a bit of background on what was probably the first Superman movie. But save that. It will be Does Superman, the 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeves, hold up? And that will be out in the channel, like I said, later tonight or sometime tomorrow.
The Christensen cut.
The Christensen cut. Well, it's more or less like, keep trying to jam it down. But all right, with that out of the way, next week's movie... and this will be not a first, but maybe, actually a first for the regular show. Gonna take a look at the first 3 episodes of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And I'm looking forward to I don't think, I'm hoping it won't upset you, but I am looking forward to upsetting some Lord of the Rings jerks, just like I upset them when I said, hey, seeing a badass Galadriel, I could get into that. Because I have other interesting takes on this show already. Anyway, that's next week, next Sunday. Just a Jelly Duck, Ahmed, and Katie, thank you so much for joining the chat. Really appreciate that.
Yes.
Richard L., thank you. Final thoughts. If you don't mind, I'm going to go first on that one. Something you'd said kind of triggered my mind back on this flick. Another thing that's interesting about it, or what could have been really interesting, is that, how did you put it? It wasn't puberty. It wasn't, damn it. Apparently, I should not interrupt you less, Brian, but more, because I can't remember. What are your final thoughts?
Look,
Finish what you were saying when I cut you off and give me a mark.
You ruined my flow, man. No,
it's what I do.
Yeah, this is true.
You are not new here.
Look, I think for what they were trying to do with this film, I liked what they were trying to do. I'm not saying it's an all-time classic, but I do love James Gunn. I do love his style of storytelling. And yes, he's only producing this film, but there is that fingerprint of James Gunn's style. And I think what they were trying to do is have an alternative look at Superman and What If. And I think they largely accomplished that in mixing and matching with the horror genre. I think it was relatively seamless, not an all-time classic by any stretch, but it was a really interesting thought experiment. And I liked some of the stuff that popped up in this film.
You know what? I'd even go further. It's not a mix and match with horror. It is a horror movie. They've said, what if Superman was a horror? That's the premise that you could imagine. That's the pitch. Hey, what if Superman was a horror? And everyone kind of, that's an interesting. Okay, tell us more. How would you do that?
Yes, but it's a mix and match with the most well-known superhero stories. So
no, it is not a mix and match. It is not a mix and match. It is a horror movie. They're just taking a storyline
but it doesn't start.
It
doesn't start as a horror film, though.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
It goes with that superhero genre.
No, it just doesn't. It's Superman if it was a horror, like
yes,
anything.
Exactly.
But that's not a mix. It's not a superhero / horror fusion. They took a storyline and made it a horror. It is a pure horror film. And
I would disagree with that assessment, but
because
it doesn't start as a horror film.
It starts like any horror film starts. the normal world. Then something happens. Then things go sideways. Like, what are you talking about? It doesn't start like a horror.
No, there's no kill off the top of the film. It's not death and dismemberment to start with. We're not searching for a serial killer throughout the whole film.
That's not a horror movie. That's a crime movie, a thriller, a horror movie. They like to set the normal world, and then, now that doesn't mean, like, It's a good example. Like, I mean, I couldn't last 5 minutes. It's like, tra-la-la, normal world, end of scene, small child dies. You can start the movie that way, but there's plenty of horror films that have started with, here's the normal world. Then something bad happens, or a thing happens. I'm thinking of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Normal world, then a bad thing happens. The kids do a bad thing to hide the evidence, but the horror doesn't actually start. Like, because from that point in that film, you could go anywhere. You know what? You could just turn it into a crime thriller. You know what? Do the kids start killing other kids because somebody else saw it? And then a la, okay, Heathers is not quite the perfect comparison, but oh, Jelly Duck's asking if we heard that there's a Winnie the Pooh horror film. And
for sure that's never going to be shown in China.
LOL.
For sure.
Probably
for sure
not.
That is definitely never going to be shown in China.
All right. Anyway,
that much we know.
Okay, that much we know. That we can agree on. All right. Thank you all very much for joining us. And like I said, next week, Jim and I are going to be looking at The Rings of Power. So yeah, you can find that on Amazon Prime. Who doesn't have Amazon Prime? Watch, join us. And who knows? You know what? Maybe we'll invite DMG just so he and I can argue again. All right, everybody. Thank you all so very, very much. Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody.